My name's Peter Brown. I am Head of Learning Innovation and Design at Bayer. I've been working in e-learning for about 19 years, come from a large European vendor, and joined Bayer in 2016. And I've been developing a lot of scenario-based learning over those years, but specifically since I've joined Bayer, since 2016, we have been doing a few more as well. So today I'm here to tell you a bit more about virtual scenarios at Bayer. So I'm going to go over some uses of scenario-based learning at Bayer. Why do we use scenario simulation-based learning? I'm going to take a look at a couple of solutions and some magic summary. So we've been using scenario-based learning at Bayer in e-learning for a few years now. And I'd like to point out a few various approaches to scenario-based learning that can be applied to projects we've worked on. So the different types of simulation apply to the learning needs. So we do deliverable simulations, like this one. I will show you examples later, so we don't need to talk about them. Where a deliverable simulation is where you work through a scenario to complete a form, for example. Say, for example, at a clinical site assessment. So your ultimate outcome through that scenario is a deliverable which is fit for purpose and, compliant with all the regulations. This one about source documentation, which I'm going to show you in a bit, is a real-time simulation. So you're thrown straight into a real-time conversation with some medical practitioners and nurses and site associates. And we'll go about the technicalities of that in a minute. This is the software simulation is another application for scenario-based learning. So it's not just about interacting with one-to-one people or following process. You can actually have a simulation to do with how to complete and use and interact with a piece of software effectively, even get a chance to have a go yourself in a safe environment, and not email the world your worst video. This is a big one. One we've just worked on for the last couple of years is the Team Excellence project, which is a performance simulation. So we're actually looking at changing knowledge, skills and behavior and getting people to apply their knowledge and skills to implement behavioral change within a sort of team scenario. Is another deliverable simulation, which I'm going to show you an example of the varying levels of richness within the scenarios projects that we produce. And I'm not going to show you any innovation today. I'm just going to say that we're looking at it. We are investigating artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual scenarios in VR, but I'm going to save that for the discussions later because I remain to be convinced. So, okay, why do we use scenario simulation-based learning at Bayer? A lot of you guys will already know this, but I'd just like to pick up on a few bits and bobs. Elimination of risks and danger. We're in a pharmaceutical development manufacturing industry, and our job is to be responsible for the health and safety of customers and make sure they don't die. So for our staff to be able to train in a safe environment is paramount, because you can't practice on patients willy-nilly, making mistakes. It just doesn't happen. Elimination of the need for costly sites and equipment. Going back to maybe a cost saving with e-learning, which I do believe exists because we employ 120,000 people, and sending 20,000 monitors to various training sites around the world is immensely costful. Not only that, it has a massive carbon footprint, so there's environmental need as well. You can do things that are impossible in the real world. Increased learner motivation. Everyone loves a game. Everyone loves trying to get it wrong. Everyone likes trying to kill their patient. So a lot of learners get motivated by that, and I think it does enable people to learn by making mistakes, which is really important. Acceleration of learning by by telescoping on particular topics of high need, you can accelerate the learning because people can focus on the training areas that people need to be taught on. We do believe that simulation-based learning does increase retention through enforcement, and increased retention through realism is evident. So let's move on to some examples. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through a couple of examples here now. This is a real-life simulation. I'm trying to demonstrate here the varying levels of investment, and that it's not all about money. So this is maybe a more low-key investment from us. It uses real-life simulations to understand the requirements of the role of a CRA, which is a clinical research associate or a monitor, in reviewing source documentation. So when they get to the site, they need to review source documentation as part of a clinical trial and make sure it's correct. So the scene opens up, and you arrive at the hospital and you start to review some documentation. You're given some documentation to have a look at, and the first exercise is just to choose some things that may potentially have issues or don't. And as you're doing that, a conversation starts. You start hearing a conversation between the study coordinator and the clinic nurse. And so this is an audio-led course, so you're just basically watching a dialogue carry out. You can hear the audio, you can read it if you want. As you go through the scenario, you hear this conversation, and you're given opportunity to provide questions, probing questions not interrogate, but to question, because it's your job as a monitor to question the processes, the correctness of the data and stuff like that. So the branching is quite shallow, as in it's not linear, it's a step above, as in you can make decisions and go, and it can either be right or wrong. It's quite binary in a pharmaceutical environment. So we're going to go through this. We ask questions, and then you can get feedback based on your questions, which are slightly different, which will take you down an alternative route. And in this situation, I am actually going to choose the wrong option once I get to the bottom of it. And I've ended up with an audit finding with several discrepancies, which is really bad news. So the learner is given the opportunity to go back and do it again and try multiple scenarios based on the information that they're given. There are plenty of resources to look at. It's audio-led, so as long as you've got the story, you could almost use any tool to put this together, because it's just a step of conversation followed by questions and a route and a path that you follow. But ultimately, the consequences can be really good or fatal or deadly. The next example is just to show you a little bit more richness of what we do in some of the simulations. It's a deliverable simulation. So in the clinical development process, we have many stages that are gated that we need to get to and move on with a team discussion. So you can't get past a stage without it being absolutely right. So in this scenario, we're following a clinical trial as a core study member. It's a true-to-life scenario. As you go through, you're given there's 3 scenarios to get through to get to a stage which is called protocol level 2, which you're going to make an agreement on. To do that is a lot of information, and it's a massive task to go through this. A drug can take 15 years to get to market, and the clinical stages and the trials can take forever. But here we used a mixture of stock shots, stock photography, audio, and a bit of animation just to bring a little bit to life. I will show you some more later, but the scenario follows through. It's shallow branching as well, so you've got choices to make, which can be consequential. It just feels a little bit richer. You've also given it options to pause and take a look at some of the documentation that you need to make decisions about making the decision. So you get questions throughout it to obviously steer your way through the scenario and the branches, which are either right or wrong. If you're incorrect, it will give you the consequential feedback and tell you where you went wrong. You can go and have another go, but ultimately what you want to do is get to the end by making the right decision whilst exploring the wrong decisions and ultimately getting the best choice, and you get a summary at the end to agree that, well done, you've made it through the scenario, we've reached protocol level 2, everyone's very happy. So just moving on to the performance simulation, I wanted to show where this fits in a larger initiative. So we had a 2-year learning path called A Team in Action. As you can see, we've done numerous amounts of e-learning which have been along the awareness and the capable learning needs, which were basically, I have been told. So we're making awareness of people about this team initiative, which is a framework for how teams within Bayer should work and operate from a skills and behaviours perspective. So you're really trying to change people's behaviours to make sure that teams collaborate and work well. There's a more in-depth e-learning program of 8 modules which look at the individual team dynamics like trust, collaboration, etc. Then we've run a virtual classroom session so people will actually get involved. But ultimately, at the end, we're really trying to get people to start critique and become experts within the team dynamics. So they're using their knowledge, skills, and behaviour to actually get the best outcome. So summing up, at Bayer, a scenario and scenario-based learning, we can save lives as well as money, have a positive performance benefits, avoid costly commercial mistakes, and are massively effective as a way of capturing and leveraging experiential knowledge. In fact, the chief limitation to more widespread use of simulations is not technological or cost-related, but I think it can be put down to a limitation of imagination. Thank you very much.